Our first year in our Legend car was a huge learning curve for us. We knew absolutely nothing about them coming into the year, but we've obviously went through the whole year and learned a ton about these cars. We knew what we can do to adjust it on the track, and we started learning what exactly we needed to bring to the track for us to be successful, whether it was what we needed to change tires or make our small adjustments on the car for handling, or even in the event of a crash, what we need to bring to be able to get the car on the trailer for us. So there wasn't really a ton of information on that kind of stuff when we were first getting into these and trying to look it up. And if you post the question about what kind of stuff you want to bring to the track in the Facebook groups, there's gonna be a lot of sarcastic comments on there talking about, you should just bring a whole backup car or bring everything in your garage. And for a lot of people, that's not realistic. I know for us, it's not, because we're running a 7x16 trailer right now. But today we're gonna talk about everything that we brought to the track on a daily basis and how what we brought kind of shifted throughout the year and what we learned, and hope that it can help some of you out. Now, when we ran the white car earlier in the year, we were lucky enough to have a quick jack with it. So that was kind of our primary jack for the car throughout the weekend. All it does is hook onto the front or rear bumper, and you can jack it up that way, and you don't need to lug around a big heavy steel or aluminum floor jack. But when we sold that car, the quick jack ended up going with it. So when we got this car, we ended up having to bring our floor jacks. We do have a 1.5 ton racing jack as well as a 3 ton Daytona jack. Both of these obviously are from Harbor Freight. I know Daytona came out with a pretty good racing jack, and a lot of people are starting to switch to those, but these jacks were definitely capable of doing the job that we needed them to do while we were at the track. So we just figured that these were kind of our go-to once we no longer had a quick jack. We also brought our jack stands throughout the year, regardless of what kind of jack we had, because the quick jack was able to lift the car up enough to get our jack stands under. And of course, these jacks, you don't want to necessarily work on the car while it's resting on the jack, so it's always nice to put your jack stands under the car when able. That way the car's not relying on the jack to balance it and hold the car up while you're working on it. So we always brought 4 jack stands with us, so always enough to go around the 4 corners of the car. Now, we tried to maximize our space inside the trailer as much as we physically could, which meant a lot of the stuff we needed to buy were gonna be either pre-packaged like this, or ended up needing to be put inside of a little mobile tool cart or like a bin or something. Now, luckily, pretty much everything we needed to bring tool-wise was able to fit inside of this little tool cart throughout the year. Obviously, we would bring paper towels and gloves with us, and kept our little quick detailer kind of stuff on the side over here. But we kept this cart as minimal as we could to try and only bring the stuff we really needed. We've got our 3/8 inch impact here, as well as a couple tape measures, some frog tape. We've got our boonie cap to help keep our neck shaded during hot summer days. We've also got a nut driver, as well as some pry bars and a bunch of screwdrivers on either side. Plenty of hex style bits that will fit inside of the nut driver, as well as a flathead that now acts as our rear deck lid remover. We brought plenty of drill bits for everything. Cobalt bits to help get through metal if we needed to, and obviously titanium for everything else that would go through fiberglass, since we don't necessarily need cobalt to get through those. Obviously, we have a set of gloves here that we would use, some vice grips, plenty of picks, and everything you would need to rivet a piece back onto the car. We bought a big old bag of white rivets here that we probably don't even get to use anymore, because as you can tell, the car is all black. So this was bought during our ownership of the last car. We've got plenty of 1/8 inch rivets here, as well as the 3/16 rivet gun. It's all manual. We've also got some quarter turn stuff over here, because on the last car we had, our fenders were held in with quarter turn nuts, and we kept them in there just in case we ever wanted to convert these fenders to that. In this drawer, we kept a couple things like some paint markers, a Sharpie. We got this little drill brush attachment piece to help get the holes on the wheels cleaned up so that they don't rust. We got a center punch, a valve stem core remover tool, another center punch, and the quarter turn screwdriver. We also have some feeler gauges here and a couple of box cutters, an extra hitch pin for our trailer, a infrared temperature gun. This is all some extra long metric hex sockets. We've used them a couple times, but they're not needed in a lot of places. That's why they sat in here. We got some squeegees just in case we ever need to put any new vinyl on. These are Our rear axle seals, gotta have these now. Ever since the Legend Invasion, we ended up buying a couple extra of these seals and just keeping them on us just in case. And then we have our 2 tape measures for our toe plates, which are inside of our bin, which we'll get to in a little bit. We also had some safety wire pliers and some safety wire just in case we needed to cut our old safety wire off and do a fluid change on either a motor or a rear end. This drawer, I would say, is the one that we use the most. We've got all of our ratcheting wrenches. 99% of the time we'll use the 3/4 one here, just because that's what's holding up all of our suspension bits. We have used a couple of the metric ones, but not a ton of them. We've also got our digital tire gauge, which a lot of people like the analog one, but I don't really care for it. We've also got a magnet just in case we drop something and can't get to it. Plenty of 3/8 impact extensions and 3/8 metric sockets. We've also got plenty of zip ties here and some decent hex drivers, both metric and standard, just in case. And we always like to keep these on us. These help us measure out our radius rods in the event we need to replace one on the car. And we also like to keep our electric ratchet in here. Here we keep most of our hammers. We've got a 2-pound mini sledge, a dead blow, and a normal framing hammer. I don't think we've used this one at all, so we're probably gonna pull this one out, but it doesn't hurt to have whatever hammers you want. We also have a thing of 80 grit sandpaper in there just to help clean up our pads and deglaze them in between sessions. This is where we keep our big boy impact with a 1-inch socket on it for our wheels and tires, just to keep it from rolling around inside the trailer. We've also got a multimeter in this bag because you never know when you'll have electrical issues, especially now that the FZ09 is electric fuel injection and no longer a carbureted motor, and there's plenty of connections coming off that wiring harness, so it's definitely nice to have a multimeter on you. We've got plenty of pliers, some adjustable wrenches and whatnot. Now our bottom shelf here was used mostly for a bunch of miscellaneous stuff. We had our funnels, extra gear fluid, brake fluid, all of our oil was down here. Obviously we had our brake cleaner, a couple of microfiber towels, plenty of hardware, and a couple of other impact sockets, but we try to keep it as minimal as we can and hopefully not so overfilled that every bump we hit when the toolbox was in the trailer would cause anything to spill over the edge of that border. So we tried to keep as little as we could underneath there. And this right here is the set of hand tools that we brought primarily for the sockets. And we did it this way just because it had already come in its own case and it's, you know, easy to carry around, not a big footprint, and it didn't take up any space inside of our toolbox here. So gave us plenty of ratchets, everything from 1/4 to 3/8 a 1/2 inch. Plenty of extensions, plenty of deep sockets as well as the shallow ones. And we also had some needle nose pliers, some wire cutters with it. Definitely a pretty decent versatile kit for us at the track. And obviously we used a lot of standard stuff, so we could probably cut this down in half, but because it's in its own case, we don't feel like we really need to. So we just brought it as a whole kit. We also would stack all of our extra tires in the trailer and bring what we needed in the event that we had a blowout, just so that we can throw the extra tire on the car and hopefully finish out the race. But realistically, anything more than a tire change pretty much ended our night, so we didn't really fret too much if it was anything more severe than that. Now, if you're not familiar, this bag holds a car cover for the coupe, and we would bring this occasionally, especially on the days that were forecasted to have rain, because in Colorado you never know what the weather's going to be. So having a cover is pretty ideal for us, especially when the forecast does call for rain. I know that these aren't necessarily waterproof covers, but they do help quite a bit whenever it does rain, help keep the seat nice and dry. Now this bin is where we kept a lot of the extra stuff for the car. Obviously we had a propane torch as well as our toe plates in here, but this is where we kept all of the extra parts for the car. Obviously kept an extra gallon of water here as well as an extra thing of water wetter just in case we needed to change out the fluid in our radiator once we got the FZ09 car. This is also where we kept all of our spare radius rods and Hines and everything that we needed suspension wise, just in case, to get the car loaded back up on the trailer. Those boxes contain 2 brand new hubs and definitely were our spares, but with no extra bearings or spindle or anything, I feel like we don't really need to carry that kind of thing around. We also bring our seal puller and our stagger stick in here just to help replace the things or check our stagger while we're at the track. And obviously we have a couple of extra springs in the bucket just in case we need to make a quick change at the track. Although realistically, we try to avoid changing springs at the track by all means, because then we have to rescale the car and make sure our ride height gets back to what it needs to be. And because we don't have scales and we got to rely on the tech shed scales, we try to avoid doing that in the first place, but sometimes it is necessary. We also obviously started bringing a nitrogen cylinder with us once we ended up buying one. And we would also carry around these car dollies just in case we ended up destroying something to the point to where we could not roll the car in. We would just jack the car up and put it on there. Luckily for us, that didn't happen this year with this car or the other car. So every night we were able to at the very least, roll the car back onto the trailer. We also brought an air compressor with us just in case we needed to air the tire up after the race, or, you know, air up the car tires or even the trailer tires that we were towing with. So we always brought this along with us, as well as our hoses and what we needed to fill the tires with. We also brought a fuel jug for the Legend car and an extra fuel jug for our tow car just in case we ended up running out, which usually we have no problem with because by the time we get home we still had more than enough fuel. But you never know if you need to stop somewhere and spend an extended period of time there. Now, tool wise, that's pretty much all that we brought with us to the track every weekend. There weren't many variations on all the tools that we brought, but once we started getting later in the year and started figuring out different ways to pack up the trailer, we ended up finding a better way to store all of our parts that we could swap out at the track, and you know, that was definitely a plus for us. Now, we did end up bringing things like brake clean and some penetrating oil just in case we needed it, but we never really needed anything more than that of the fluid outside of the car that's not like brake fluid or engine oil or anything like that. And we've never had to do an oil change at the track for the motor, but we did have to do a fluid swap on the rear end when we swapped out our right rear seal. Now, I know none of my stuff was organized very well. In fact, we're probably going to go over our setup over the winter here and try to maximize the space that we have and try and figure out the stuff we can get rid of and stuff we definitely need to bring for next year and stuff we probably don't need to bring. So this is definitely continuing to be a work in progress, and it's by far from the end goal of what we have. But after wrapping up our first year, I felt like we brought enough for what we needed to the track. Hopefully, as we tear things apart in this car and start replacing things, we'll have those old parts that we can bring as spares as well, and maybe continue a race if we end up bending a radius route or something simple like that. But as of right now, until we can get more and more parts, we're gonna, you know, still have to call it quits after anything more than just a flat tire. So we're definitely going to continue working on this through the winter, and hopefully we can bring something a little more organized and a little more efficient to the track next year. I hope you guys enjoyed this quick little video of what we would bring to the track every weekend, and would love to hear some feedback on what you guys thought, because, you know, we still know very little about these cars and what we need to bring. And if you think that there's any way that we could save space, or, you know, some other things that we haven't come across yet that we definitely need at the track, we would definitely appreciate hearing stuff like that. But as of right now, that's all I've got for you. I appreciate you guys watching. Hope to catch you in the next one.